Hi, my name is Andrea Kopranovic. I'm a PhD candidate at the ATTP and a lecturer here. My engagement with the department started out almost 6 years ago in early 2016. And during that time, I formed, and still do, an understanding of what it could mean to be an active agent of change by means of listening, writing, thinking, talking, and teaching. How can we develop a stance while moving constantly? This is a question that haunts me. And as it is mostly hard to pinpoint when precisely our being in the world is changing and when we can speak of such a stance, I took the liberty today to bring evidence of my personal process of change to this conversation. These are my notebooks of the past years, starting from an entry from 2016 in February and reaching up to yesterday evening. I'm very fond of writing by hand as I personally gain deeper insights of ideas, of moods, of concepts, while articulating them through the whole body. It is something different to me than writing through the fingertips. I love color coding and indexing thought patterns, crossing out things with force and conviction, and I'm very sensible of the qualities of paper and pen. I started at the department with this notebook. It was just months before Vera Bühlmann started her professorship, and in this period I was invited to join a research group that was led by Oliver Schürer at the time. Back then, I had just recently graduated from the University of Salzburg and I was a freshly baked art historian. My key interests were in medieval sculpture, contemporary art, but also architecture in general. But I had a rather conservative outlook what the latter meant. I was interested in the history of architecture, but also in contemporary engagement with it from a form of an alien view, maybe we would say, because I'm not an architect myself. So my perception of it was strongly determined by the dichotomy of it being dominated by art and technology. And it was in a sense very distant from the understanding of digital architectonics within our department today. So the journey of this understanding came along quite slowly. And I have to admit that at first, being part of the research group that I joined in 2016 didn't help that. Our endeavor in the group was to reconstruct a sort of a history of an institution that famously hosted architecture classes in a non-academic way as summer courses. And I want to read a passage from the first notebook, How I Saw the World Back Then, the very first abstract of sorts of my thesis, but it's in German though, so bear with me. Zeitgenössische städtebauliche Entwicklungen werden in der Architekturklassen der Salzburger Sommerakademie seit ihrer Gründung kritisch hinterfragt, verfolgt oder kreiert. Unter dem Direktor Wieland Schmid waren vorwiegend österreichische Architekten eingeladen, sich diesem Diskurs zu stellen und so in Zusammenarbeit mit ihren Schülerinnen die heimische Architekturlandschaft entscheidend mitzuprägen. Warum diese Ausrichtung zu dieser Zeit stattfand, welche Themen behandelt wurden und innerhalb welchen Netzwerken die Protagonisten agierten, soll untersucht werden. There were 5 of us, Michaela, Dietmar, and I were on board as PhD students. Christian joined as a postdoc, and as I already said, Oliver would lead the efforts. So the architecture classes of the Summer Academy in Salzburg were a major research interest in a threefold manner. Michaela would look at the teaching methods, and she still does that at another department. Dietmar, who quit in the meantime, would look at the political state of affairs. And I would look at the transformations, as I called them back then, taking place in between architecture, art, and curating. And it was a mingling of ideas, of methods, of substances, although I really believed that this was the space for me to branch out and focus on it at the same time. So I started my PhD around this topic and titled it, already with the first input from Vera, Architektur bis Kuratieren, die Klassen der Sommerakademie. But indeed it was a narrow corset, and which I only came to understand 2 years later. I want to read another passage to show that. This time it's a diagram, a mind map of sorts, where I pictured my research being in a bubble, which had a historic basis at heart. I tried to frame it within the simulacrum and the theories of discontinuity by Michel Foucault. And I put architecture theory and curating in 2 blocks and marked them with a big X communication that drives them in the middle or holds them together. And the questions I raised for both parts were the same. I was asking how to communicate architecture theory, which parameters does it have, what part of discussions are going on, and where would the discourse be located at. And I tried to find a method, a place, I tried to find a language, a voice to articulate a multidimensional model, but I failed in a sense because it was, still very, I don't know, I would say held up in a dichotomy that I couldn't really bridge. So for the past years, from 2016 until July of this year, 2021, I was not only working on my PhD, but I also had a bread and butter job that I immensely enjoyed. I was a gallery assistant for the first 2 years, and later had the position of an associate director at Christine König Galerie in Vienna. This brought me forward in many ways because I gained knowledge and experience in the art world. I learned how to manage and sustain a gallery system, but also I met a lot of friends within this realm of, became friends with artists, with gallerists, museum workers, cultural workers, art handlers, collectors, writers, and critics. So as you can imagine, I jumped in and out of my research topic several times a week or even a day, and it was really hard to focus and gain a routine in writing and to become confident within the academic field. Again, maybe, while working in an environment that is so different. So how did I shape my thinking further? First of all, it happened through the PhD colloquia at the department. They gave and still do give me a lot of new impulses on how to be in the world and how architecture theory is leading us there. And it's a very fruitful and complex framework of thoughts to which we are all connected here. It is in a manifold nature of abstract thinking in mathematics and digital architectonics through the gnomon and so on. And it made me change my perspective almost entirely and had me sucked into a big wave of change. Now I'm more considerate to ask questions like, how could I until recently have been so convinced that I had a research topic that was relevant but stuck in such conservative outlooks? And how can I examine them anew in a manner that is actually more in tune in the way I described just now? So I decided to quit my job, not cutting all ties, not never looking back again, but rather taking a break, after which I didn't know what the future would bring. And I'm in this sabbatical year right now. I could only do this, as you can imagine, besides financial stability, after I started to gain more certainty of the development in my thinking. And let me give you a last glimpse into some notes to see where I'm headed now with this. Now I ask questions like, what would the field of curating be today? How to think of it today within a gesture or many gestures that incorporate the digital and make relevant, or frame the digital in a way today. I'm translating from German, so this takes a bit of time. Or how to find upright stance. In German it would be aufrechte and also aufrichtige Haltung. How to formulate that against eventisms or spectacles. What forms and figures and gestures and statues maybe we can open up to such an understanding of maybe geometrical curating. And it is not the curating of the digital, and it's not this NFT blockchain hype thing to describe it as a spectacle again, but it's rather how to develop a sort of mechanics to incorporate the practice and theory of curating today in a sense of it being a mediator of something in between. So as you can see, my research interest has evolved from only looking at architecture and the writing classes of the summer academy. I want now to bridge the roles of my realities, being a writer, a curator, an enthusiast of arts, while at the same time being involved within that in an academic climate. So this leads to my current interest, something close to an architectonics of curating. I believe that teaching also helps these efforts immensely. In my seminar right now on current issues in architecture theory, investigate the role of institutions and how they play a role today in a playful way. We write fairy tales around abstract and concrete concepts like care, radical imagination, risk, agency, critique, movement. And it is lovely to think through the arts again in a way that is new to me as well. So I hope my efforts in this way, to search for a stance within perpetual movement, can bear fruits one day. Thank you.